Welcome, everybody, to another awesome episode of Rock Talk with the DocRocker. I am joined by the DocRocker himself, Danton Orlando, and a guest who is going to talk about black metal. Right? What are we doing today? Black metal, right?
Yeah, black metal it is. Everyone give a nice big warm welcome to our friend Josh, who's gonna grace us with his knowledge and expertise on the genre. We're gonna talk about as many artists as we can stuff into this episode, and we can get into so much more than just even the bands themselves and the music. We could talk about the culture. We could talk about some history. There's a bunch of documentaries and movies that are out on Hulu right now that you could tune into and check out to get a really good idea of what black metal is all about. And Josh here is going to tell you all about it. So
black metal is more than just music, though. Black metal is a culture.
Absolutely.
It's safe to say there's a lot of culture involved in that. We'll get into that in a little bit. First, for our viewers, though, we're going to try to define black metal. I'll tell you what I found out about black metal, how I see it, and then you guys tell me if I'm right, wrong, sort of right.
Sounds
you know,
good.
Happy to
black
help.
metal, extreme subgenre of heavy metal music. Common traits are fast tempos, shrieking vocals, highly distorted guitars, lo-fi recording. That's what I definitely noticed.
His poor sound quality is a defining
poor
factor.
sound, we'll call
And I don't
poor
mean
sound.
that as an
I
insult.
was being nice.
Right.
I was being nice.
We'll talk
There's an
about
emphasis
that.
on atmosphere, and artists usually do the corpse paint, and they adopt usually pseudonyms. They don't usually don't use their own names. They have stage names.
Yeah,
correct.
Which is also common in like glam metal and stuff like that. Now, I'm only familiar with some black metal bands. We're going back because, again, I'm a little bit older than the other guys on the podcast. I remember Venom in high school. I remember Venom and Bathory were these extremely crazy bands when I was in high school. And I heard the album Black Metal. That was 1982. Now, okay, I was not in high school in 82, but I'm not that old. But I remember hearing Black Metal when I was in high school. And that album, I'm pretty sure it coined the phrase black metal.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like a thrash album. I just listened to it again today just to kind of relive my high school years. There was a guy that we used to hang out and smoke cigarettes in his car named Andy, who was really into black metal, or really into Venom, I should say. And so it took me right back to smoking in this guy's car before class, listening to black metal and thinking, wow, this is a really, really horribly produced album. And how are the guys crazy? They were crazy though. It was kind of scary. So I kind of enjoyed it though, going back and listening to it a little bit today. I kind of enjoyed it. I haven't listened to it, I'd say probably since 1989, 1990. The other one I got to mention is Bathory. Some say it's the blueprint for Scandinavian black metal.
Yes.
With anti-Christian themes, and one of the first bands to use those shrieking vocals that are so common with black metal. As far as the second wave of black metal in the early 90s, I know who Mayhem, Darkthrone, Burzum, Immortal, Gorgoth, but that's pretty much it. I'm not super familiar with them, but I know who they are, and I know the stories behind them. So that's about all I have for black metal. So please educate.
All right.
Take it away, man. Where do you want to start?
I mean, the best place to start is at the beginning, as with anything.
Okay.
So one of the best things that you brought up is
Hi there, little puppy.
is
another guest here.
Yeah, I got my dogs too. They're back here. They're being quiet.
He'll show up from time to time. Good boy.
Oh yeah, such a good.
The
you can see Lucy in the corner. She's over here in the corner. Lucy.
Oh yeah, I can see her on the couch.
She's half husky, half corgi. So.
Oh nice.
All right.
We have an Irish.
Sorry. Go ahead. We're not about dogs. It's about black metal.
That's true. Although dogs are also pretty cult. One of the things that you brought up that's actually really cool is Venom is interesting. Also a big part of the thrash metal scene birth as well.
Yeah. A little
whereas
bit.
when you get into thrash and stuff, a lot of them pull on Motorhead and Priest, a lot of the really early new wave stuff. Made into an extent, but less melodic, more of the.
You can at least associate a lot of the new wave British stuff with the thrash scene in the 80s, but mainly because of the decade. It all came out at the same
Metallica
time.
did a bunch of new wave of British heavy metal covers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just
and vice
picked them
versa.
up a little bit. So
I'm sure there's a bunch of new wave bands out there that were doing like Slayer covers and Anthrax tunes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
and
it's pretty easy to tie those two genres together in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. Like, so like before then, I would say it's like while it's definitely now well established as like the essential like first wave. One of the big things about it is that at the time it was just considered part of the underground metal movement. Like back then they didn't really, as us who were there, like right when these genres were just getting really solidly defined, or were like there before it was like all ironed out. It was all part of that underground scene to make metal, keep it underground and more, get that punky vibe, that less mainstream that a lot of music did. And especially
as early as the late 70s.
Right. And especially to avoid later on, like in the later 80s, to avoid the glam scene that came out and really took over. And we could do a whole thing
for more on that. Tune into one of our previous episodes. We talk about glam metal and we cover a good bit of stuff there.
Yeah, because I mean, we could go into like the overproduction and the formulaic producing. And so there's a million things we could go into there, not to mention the ballads, dear God. But
it's funny. We did that whole episode. I don't even think we mentioned the ballads once. We kind of avoided.
Oh no, we did. But I lived that. I lived that whole thing. It was horrible.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't remember us talking about that a whole lot. We kind of like focused more on the more fun.
I don't want to remember that. That was
most of us drink to forget, right?
Yeah. A slow song's fine, but when you get that, well, again, whatever.
Yeah. But so let's go back to the kind of emerging powers of black metal in the
Venom, of course.
Exactly, because
Venom was right on that camp.
Yeah, to like build it into like that underground movement that was going on. So like that was like the big thing, because Venom was one of the really early bands, them and Merciful Fate, that really.
How can I forget King Diamond and Merciful Fate?
All right,
never heard of them. Guys, tell me all about it.
Oh my God!
I just broke Jeff's mind.
Here,
dude, don't forget, guys. I live under a rock. There is so much music that I've never heard or been exposed to before. So
you know who King Diamond is, right? Do you know who King Diamond is, right?
I mean, I've heard. No, I don't really.
Okay, well, I'll send you some King Diamond stuff too.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, his soul stuff is great. His Merciful Fate stuff is excellent.
Post it on the Facebook group. Here we go. We got a copy of King Diamond. Fatal Portrait is right here. We have
the Merciful Fate stuff. Don't Break the Oath. Melissa. In the Shadows. I think the reunion one was called In the Shadows. Came out when I was in college. It's great stuff. Man. Merciful Fate and King Diamond, to me, have more in common with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, Motorhead. But they have that satanic imagery because King Diamond, the singer, he wears corpse paint. He was doing it way, 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 way long ago. I mean, the only other person that was wearing corpse paint back then was Kiss. Kiss and King Diamond were wearing the makeup, and that was it. King Diamond actually got sued by
let's just set the record straight. Kiss is by absolutely no means whatsoever anything remotely resembling black metal, and they never will be. I think that might be a really common misconception for any like kind of average listener that doesn't really know the genre that well. They're like, oh, guys that wear the corpse paint, it's a Kiss, right?
That's automatically right in there with that. I listen to everything person, and they look at Kiss, and then they're like, ooh, that's hard for me.
But yeah, King Diamond, he wore the makeup early on, and he's a devout Satanist. As far as I know, he's still a Satanist. He belongs to the Church of Satan.
One of the common threads we're going to explore quite a bit with a lot of famous black metal.
So that's part of that culture, that anti-Christian and organized religion kind of thing, really kicks in the 90s.
Which is also you can tie in so many parallels between thrash and black, because you look at one of the pillars of thrash with Slayer. That's the definition of anti-Christian.
Going back to Venom again, Venom came out and said, the guys from Venom were like, "This is all an act. Like they don't really believe all this, but
we're just doing it for showmanship and for fun."
Right. The second wave in the early 90s, the Norwegian bands, they believe that. They burnt down churches. I don't condone that, especially because they were historic buildings that were 600-700 years old. They were
burned to the ground.
I'm a big history buff, so it's like when I heard about that, it's like, that's taking a little bit too far. But whatever.
No, you're fine. You get right into where it gets complex for me in a way.
It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, absolutely. Because
But see, you could always separate the musician from what they do, though. Okay.
yes.
That guy that peed on all the girls. R. Kelly. He's a great R&B
I
artist,
forgot all about that. Oh
Yeah.
my god!
but he's a terrible person.
Yeah.
So you can say,
it's not even so much a musical thing. You can say that with any of the arts. Look at J.K. Rowling with all the Harry Potter stuff going on. She comes up with this wonderful, great fantasy world and writes a series of great novels, and now she's like this hate mongering anti-trans person. It's like, where the hell did that come from? Like, I see so many of those updates on the news of these great artists that come out and be really kind of crappy people, and that's really disheartening to me.
My thing with that is just,
separate it from the art. Enjoy the art. You don't have to enjoy the people.
No, my thing always should be is that a person should be separated from whatever their profession is, and especially if it's an artistic profession.
Right.
Right.
Even though if the message of the work is incredibly personal, still, that's left up to the person to interpret, not left up to the artist.
Yeah, interpretation's a big word.
Absolutely, which is, but that's a whole thing, get into a hate culture on people.
Yeah,
but
and that could be an interesting thing for us to explore, because that's kind of there's this really negative stigma again, oh, you listen to black metal, you're some kind of evil Satanist, and you want to kill babies,
you just enjoy it,
punch puppies, and burn churches.
Yeah,
but so many of the artists maybe had some of that imagery and some of that evocation of such an act, but a lot of them didn't really believe in doing those things. It's just we talked about this in one of our Iron Maiden episodes, where you look at the album cover for the Number of the Beast.
Oh god.
And it's they must be a whole bunch of raging Satanists. And
Welcome
it's no,
to the height of the satanic band.
Harris really just wrote that about a bad dream that he had and wanted to make a piece of art out of it.
Right,
and that was all that happened. And it was funny because in one of the interviews, not to go on a tangent here, we're going to probably go on a lot of tangents, knowing the three of us, but I know one Number was really big, and they were doing I think it was their first world tour, and a whole bunch of American audiences are buying the albums just to burn them because they thought it was some sort of anti-Christian stuff. And it's funny because you go back to interviews with the bands, and they're like, hey, they bought our record. I don't care what they do with it. We made the money.
Oh my god, I know.
Yeah. So
1982. 82.
That was when it came out, right? Now, when did they do the tour, though?
I don't know. Probably
later than that, probably 83-ish, 4-ish.
Man,
something.
I didn't realize that came out that quick. That's 4 albums.
Yeah, because they pretty much, in their golden age, they were putting out something every year.
I was gonna say that's what, 4 straight albums.
Yeah, because Peace of Mind was 84, Power Slave was 85.
Yeah.
Somewhere in time, 86.
Back then,
Seven Son, 88.
Back then, even in the 70s, these bands would put out an album every year and a half. Look at Black Sabbath. They put out 3 albums in a year. Then again, the albums only had 8 songs on them back then, so
that's true,
right? And they weren't all crazy big progressive masterpieces either.
That's actually a good thing to bring up too, because that becomes a theme later in black metal that we could actually touch on.
Oh yeah, let's definitely
which is
touch
really
on that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, to keep the theme. So as far as the core, to get back to our first wave stuff, where our true beginnings are, is so we have Venom. We got the thing.
So again, give us a time frame. When is all this going on?
Oh my God, Venom.
82.
Yeah.
82 is black metal. Yeah, right. By Venom. Yeah.
Yeah, because we.
Bathory is 84.
Correct. We get Bathory, and then also around that time, we also have 2 other groups that come up that are basically the same group because it's all by Tom G. Warrior. Is we get Hellhammer and Celtic Frost.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, 2 other bands I forgot about. Celtic Frost. They were great, man.
Yeah, and
not Cherry Orchard, the other stuff.
Yeah, and those are the 4 groups, even though 2 of them are basically the same band, that really encapsulate a lot of what will be the influences to this genre. And when you listen to them, you could hear all the influences immediately. Those albums are really primitive, even by those standards, because of what they had to use for home recordings back then. Sure. Back then, what a raw recording is in the 90s is still higher quality than what a raw recording in the early 80s is. So
that says something.
Exactly. So we really kind of established this DIY, very punk mode. And the punks really kind of nailed this, how to do it. When you listen to an early Misfits or Ramones album, the audio's not great, but the songs are baller.
And that's intentional. They didn't want really super overproduced studio
No.
stuff. They wanted it to be a bunch of kids in a garage, shouting it out and having fun.
Right, and that was the whole point. The thing is, though, with Bathory in them too, this is in the 80s and stuff, so they're trying to make their rise. But any culture that starts to breed, you know, everyone else who sees this band start getting this underground vibe with them and then unite, and then it becomes its own individual culture.
Yeah, not to mention, because since how much of it was underground and how much of it, especially on the artistic content of what the albums were written about, these bands never dreamed about ever hitting like a mainstream market and making lots of sales. So a lot of it's for, you know, financial reasons too. Like we don't have the money to shell out for like real good studio production quality, and we're going to find a way to do it ourselves and literally make our own albums from home.
Right. And that was a lot of the attitude, especially with the underground metals, punk bands, all basically that, you know, outcast music kind of style.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Outcast music.
More or less. Yeah. Like that.
Absolutely.
Like that was the whole point of it, is to just like, this is for us. We produce this for our own and we keep it inside, you know.
And if we get fans
almost like
a
Jewish community in Italy in the Renaissance, you know. That's it's weird, but it's true. Like that's a good way to like look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so it really bursts from that. And, you know, then death metal becomes a thing. Because, you know, by this point, thrash is already established. Like, that's the underground sound. Now it has a name. We got it. You know, it's heavy metal mixed with punk. Boom, thrash is born. So the next evolution from that was to go faster, harder. Boom, we get death metal. All these bands were now reactionaries to the death metal movement. Mayhem and Dark Throne are the first two that I know that were around. Oh, and Old Funeral. Which Varg was in. Varg
did Old Funeral?
Varg.
I didn't know that.
Varg and Abath from Immortal.
Oh, from Immortal,
That was their very first band, was a death metal band called Old Funeral. A lot of the old Norwegian guys started there because, as you know, later on in death metal, we'll get into, starts in Florida and Sweden. Weirdly, at the same time, they birthed the same sound.
Two very different parts of the world.
Two very different parts of the world, but two very cool things to come out of it. And we could get in Swedish style Florida, but whatever. We'll get into that later.
We'll get there.
We're in black metal now. So like a lot of their stuff started becoming reactionary music against a lot of the sameness that was coming from death metal in the late 80s, early 90s, because by then, you know, they figured out how to record it down in Florida. Everyone was going to the same studio. Everyone was getting it produced the same way.
So all of a sudden you have 10 different bands that sound like the same band doing 10 different albums.
Right. It's just like anything, you know, when a genre is birthed and it becomes, everyone wants their crack at it. But also the problem is you find the people who take that and can expand. And then you find the people who could only work within that tool set.
And then they get stuck in that.
And then they get stuck in that. And, you know, and that's one thing, you know, that I want to say for a lot of bands who sound like other bands, listen to them, give them their fair shake too. And that was initially one of the big reactions that birthed the sound. You know, they were all listening to, you know, especially Bathory, who's also from Sweden, was a massive influence on them. And a lot of the death metal stuff that was coming out was not sounding like that earlier stuff. And it was becoming way more formulaic. And they decided to go against it. And they really went out and really tried to invent a new sound. And they did. Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to give them the credit, is Snorri Blackthorn and, you know, Euronymous. They really went out of their way to find a way to play guitar. Now
to really create something new.
And all they really did was, like, you know, work with full chords, playing all the strings on a guitar and a lot of tremolo. But, you know, and experimenting with things like
at that point, even in thrash and punk, that wasn't really done yet.
Right. No,
it kind of became a defining factor for black metal.
And that was, you know, and especially then too, like faster was a thing that was still being achieved because, you know, we just had the birth of
more players were pushing the limit.
Right. Double bass became more normal. Then, you know, better pedals came out, pedal technology, so people could play even faster. The recording was able to keep up with players' actual skills. Yeah. So it was really cool that we could do this. And, you know, so we really get this awesome, especially with the guitar, a lot of it, and you know, me talking with you before, can go into so much depth and like all the minor chords and the expressions of just working purely with minor.
Yeah, and we could totally kind of geek out and get into some of that music kind of stuff. Right. Because I mean, I could give you like a shameless kind of plug here for a big part of how I got into black metal in the first place, which was a genre I've largely not known, was because of Josh in the first place, where you know, what started as like a little pet project a couple of years ago was like, oh, we want to write a black metal album. So
Yeah.
like, here's a couple ideas.
That's cool.
He would send me some
Yeah.
sketches of like, because he's a guitar player and can really kind of trim some stuff out. And he
Thank
sent me
you.
some
I
stuff. And so we got together one weekend when I was up visiting for the holidays. And, you know, so he's like, well, let me talk to, because like a guy like me that has like the kind of music theory background and more like the academic, I can break things down and analyze them. I mean, Christ, I'm a teacher. You know, I teach music professionally for a living. So
you couldn't do
so he was like, so let's kind of take that approach and really literally break down all the black metal stuff. So he gave me like a list of 5 or 6 different bands. It was pretty focused. It was like, we want to create something that sounds like this. So let's talk about why this stuff is considered black metal. And we kind of broke down like mainly from guitar player perspectives. We're both guitar players.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about, you know, some of the, you know, like Josh was mentioning, a lot of emphasis on tremolo picking technique, a lot of, you know, speaking harmonically, only using minor chords, which is really uncommon because a lot of times, even in different metal genres, there's a pretty good 50-50 blend of minor to major.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Usually fitting a certain schema of scales. But that was one of the things that made black metal, at least for me, on a first impression, really stand out. It's like there's so many of what these music theory geek guys call chromatic medians. I know I'm gonna just geek out about black metal because for me it was so different and it was cool, and it's like something like, it's one of those like, it could be perceived as like something from guys that don't know squat about theory, but it can also from someone who's like super deep into theory can make it kind of, they can look at it and appreciate it of like, oh, they're doing this really interesting thing of going from this minor to that minor, and it makes a real interesting, really dark kind of sound. And that was just the scratch of the surface of us kind of exploring that stuff.
And that's just
together.
The guitar work alone.
That's just the guitar work.
And that's where we begin. And this is where black metal starts to burst. So like now we're getting into like its sound, its birth, why it begins. So we get it there, and like it's so amazing. And then they really broke it down to like focusing on more like complex, simple structures is the way I would explain it best. Like drums are usually less fills only as they're appropriately needed. More like as much as
transition from a section.
As much as I'm loath that I'm going to say it, it's very much like Beatles drumming. You know, fucking Ringo. As much as the Beatles.
Yeah, take us from the verse to the chorus and then out, and that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, to continue, so like, you know, you're honest in that, they start forming Mayhem, which you brought up. And I'm curious, what do you know about Mayhem, as far as you know right now?
What do I know about? Just he was, that guy was murdered.
Yeah,
that was the story that everyone knows about that band. You know, it's like they burned churches down and they murdered somebody.
Yeah, well, the guitar player.
As far as music goes, I don't know much about them musically. Okay. I've listened to a few of their songs. Because my brother-in-law, Don McMarola, who used to play bass in the band I'm in, he got on a black metal kick for a while. So driving to gigs with him, we got to listen to some Mayhem, and it's atmospheric stuff, which I could really appreciate.
A big part of what they were going for.
That's a big part of it too. You know, and a lot of that's like during like a big split in the scene, how murders kind of come about in a subtle way, not really, but kind of. Again,
I don't know much about the band itself, but I'm other than what I gathered from the documentary. Really?
Okay. So, and was the documentary The Light Takes Us or Once Upon a Time in Norway? Okay, it was Light Takes. And so that's a great one. So what's really awesome there is, for those who haven't seen it, if you want a really good primer to catch up on kind of what the black metal scene starts as and get like a primer into it, Until the Light Takes Us is a great way to get into it, especially because it has very good interviews with a lot of the people right in the scene at the time. Especially Vargs, I find very interesting. I always find him interesting.
He's probably the most interesting person in the history of black metal.
Well, I will say that he is very interesting.
And the most divisive figure in black metal world.
Sure.
For obvious reasons. So one of the key things about black metal that we might as well bring up right now is the infamous burnings and murders that everyone wants to talk about. So, you know, let's get it out of the way now, you know, and then that way I could focus more on.
If it doesn't catch your interest, folks, nothing will.
Right. So to break it down, what happened is Euronymous started Mayhem, got his group together, and they
Now,
started.
was he a guitar player or a bass player?
Euronymous was a guitar player.
See, I thought he was a bass player.
No,
I messed that up. My bad.
Yeah, he was the one that is basically credited as the father of true Norwegian black metal. And
well, I've already got something to say about that.
Well, yes and no. We don't really know. We kind of know. The truth is, we'll never really know.
Yeah, and that's part of the magic of it.
That is one of the glorious things.
It's a great mystery.
But yeah, so Euronymous starts Mayhem. Everything's going very well, and eventually their singer leaves, and they need to get a new one, and they get a guy from Sweden called Pelle Olen. His nickname was Dead. Became his stage name, and Dead, was a very odd figure, very obsessed with death, and
so much to the point that he actively pursued it.
Right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Literally,
Yeah.
Now I know in the film that we watched, that's sort of a dramatization of what happened in that whole scene. He literally puts a shotgun to his mouth. Is that what happened in real life? Is that what he actually did?
That is what happened. Surprisingly enough, the movie depicted that probably as best we can imagine that happening.
Yeah. It's a really chilling scene. Yeah. And if you're not expecting it, it will.
Yeah.
It will keep you up at night. It's really terrifying.
No, and that sucks because Dead's a sad figure because Dead was a very troubled person, a very good person by all accounts, but also very troubled. From an experience that he had as a child. And
then he collected dead animals and stuff like that, and all kinds of really creepy stuff. Didn't he?
Yeah. No, Dead was, like I said, a very unique individual. One of his things that he would do is his obsession with death would be borderline on creepy, I guess people would say.
Well, absolutely. A lot of people would say that.
Pretty much everyone, come to think of it. Once you start collecting dead animals in bags, because one of his things was he was so enraptured with death to the point he was connected with it, and he believed death is where he belonged.
Yeah,
that's where he needed.
And then there was also frequent acts of self-mutilation, right? And they depict that in the film where he's on stage, literally, slicing himself up.
Yeah, and he did do that.
Okay, so that's true.
To
an extent, there's of course so many of the kind of Hollywood elements thrown in.
Yeah, well, there's some big issues I have, but that comes from me also being more like you were talking before, like an armchair historian kind of thing, like that.
Someone who kind of grew up with the stuff and knows it a little bit better than these movie makers.
But for someone who's looking for a liner note, not the most 100% accurate information, it's a good movie to watch.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I haven't seen it yet, so I'm looking for. I may even watch it tonight.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. We watched it one weekend a couple months back, and it was really fun. It's dark. It's not for the faint of heart, but
it's the best we're gonna get. The biggest problem for me is the misinterpretation of Euronymous, the person. Because for the movie they make him more empathetical than he was in real life, which we should actually get into now.
Yeah, let's totally
leads
get into that.
Dead. So Euronymous at this time has birthed Mayhem, and Mayhem becomes a big name in underground
Huge success, almost overnight.
I wouldn't say almost overnight, but very quickly.
Yeah.
In early 80s Sweden, their name was known pretty much throughout Europe. They were going along, traveling with shows, and they were doing pretty well for themselves. A brand new band, new sound, new techniques. Birth black metal as we would know it to evolve today. And we're doing really well. But Euronymous kind of had this, as for a lot of documentaries that you can watch and find out, and all the books you can read, or even the interviews with a bunch of black metal artists, Euronymous was very much kind of that. Imagine that narcissistic guy in high school that thought he was better than everyone else and would try and get everyone to do and serve under him kind of guy. That's pretty much what Euronymous was, just for the black metal genre.
Yeah, they kind of depict him in that light a couple times in the film. It's not consistent, but there were a couple points where some kind of new stylistic trend emerges, and then Euronymous kind of steps in and takes credit, and it's if I didn't think of that, no one would be doing it, and it wouldn't be cool. And there was the one scene they're all showing on the streets after one of their performances, and Euronymous kind of comes out in the film, at least for me on a first viewing, it kind of came out of nowhere. I was like, wait, that's not how it happened. Why did he? Where's this coming from? Apparently, he was a little more consistently like that.
Yeah.
Throughout his career.
Euronymous is consistent for being much almost like a totalitarian figure, and that even reflected in
like a self-proclaimed captain of the whole.
Right. One of his big things, like he was even obsessed with like Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler and a lot of like tyrannical dictators at the time, not necessarily good or inspiring figures.
Spoiler alert for any of you that are big fans of those particular figures. You don't want to model yourselves after them. It will end poorly for you.
Yeah, you'll get stabbed by a bassist with much stronger views than yours.
That's the best ending.
Which is the truth. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, again, hubris has its own downfall.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the...
It's kind of the leading.
It's almost romantic in a weird way when we get into it. But
for the intent of what the film kind of portrays, I would say that's a pretty good theme to take away from it.
Right. But
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
But we are getting ahead. But yeah, with Mayhem, so like again, Euronymous is more of a totalitarian figure. He starts attracting other groups and people who are attracted to Mayhem, the band. Just like any underground scene or any local scene, that the big band in that area usually drives the sound and what people are liking. Yeah. So since they invented the black metal, boom, it was logic. That's what blew up. And again, the metal dudes back then all pretty much knew each other. So that's why in that early black metal scene, you pretty much find out, everybody knew everybody in all the bands.
So it was pretty quick for bands to blow up and get around.
Yeah, even to the point where they like all played on each other's albums because it was such a tight-knit community. And, I believe that's what really strengthened it for Euronymous, feeling like almost like this is where black metal starts to get its cult vibe.
He becomes like this kind of pioneer of this new genre.
Right, because now we birth...
Further glorify his own self-image.
Right, we birth the concept of true cult by the time of the early 90s officially. Like the late 80s into the 90s, we're birthing black metal as it is now, and we get to this point. By this point, Mayhem's established. They have all their demos out. They have Dead, he's out there. And we get Dark Throne comes on. They switch from death metal and they start doing black metal.
By the way, cult is spelled KVLT.
Correct.
If you want to spell it correctly.
Yes, and true is spelled with a V, not a U.
Right. TRVE.
Correct. Always remember.
Do we put a umlaut on top of that or no?
No. That would make it true. Which is
that's a whole different vowel.
That's a different vowel.
Yeah. All right.
But
yeah, you can't overuse the umlaut, Jeff. You got to be really conservative with that.
Yes, they're necessary, but very point specific. Yeah. So like Euronymous starts building up the bands. He opens up his own record shop / recording studio called Helvete, which means hell in Norwegian. So he opens it up, and basically his idea is like only bands of our true style and bands that I approve of and people that I approve of as our scene are welcome here at our store. So now we get this
which was unheard of at the time,
right?
That's real weird.
Right.
That selective.
Because it is, but it isn't. Because if you remember, like at the time, like 90s, 80s and stuff, everyone remembers the factual,
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, factionalizations of everything. That's how you had to be back then, till we're so broad today. Mm-hmm. Again, another topic.
But to really be so actively dismissive of certain artists trying to come in and sell records at your shop, that's a big part of what they portray in the film. There's a whole good, at least 30 to 45 minute chunk of the movie,
and that plays into like a lot of that, going against, the one of the most true things about metal is to go against the norm, to buck the system.
Yeah.
So and we get that there. And that's one of the best things too, is boom, we get this beautiful birth, new sound and everything. And there's a culture that starts around it now. Mm-hmm. Now they start developing an identity, like corpse paint becomes a thing. Dead was really the one to start it. And originally it's called corpse paint because it was specific to look like a dead person, not so much to, not
so much like the glam makeup, black and white kind of thing. It was more like he was so fascinated with death,
right? Because especially like with Kiss and even a Merciful Fate, it's black and white. You could call corpse paint today, but you can see it's very stylized. Then it's just like smudges over the eyes and that to really darken, to really give it that death-like appearance.
Yeah, Dead really tried to seek to actively make himself look like a walking, talking corpse on stage. He wanted to really come off as a dead person.
Absolutely,
and that's really that true origin of where that whole corpse paint tradition started in the black metal genre.
And then in this time we get all the modifiers, like everyone's pushing for the lo-fi recording, everyone's pushing to sound like what Mayhem did, And a lot of it just births from what they did because of their underground status and to get themselves a name in a way.
Yeah.
And so it, you get this really tight knit community in Norway now that have their own sound, their own community, their own genre, and they're keeping themselves. But like anything, it starts to get out. And, people start getting in the community, still small. It's just in Norway, and it's building and building and building. And eventually we start getting other figures in, which is where we get Varg.
Mhm.
Varg comes along and starts dropping his Burzum demos.
Yeah, which that was all him, right? He
yes.
does the whole thing himself.
Burzum is Varg's first successful project.
Would you say Burzum is one of the kind of like the 4 pillars of like that second wave?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If not if we were to nail it down, I would say there would be 2 pillars in black metal, as we know it today, and that would be Burzum and Mayhem, in my opinion. Both of them exemplify all the common traits, all the things that make the genre great.
True pioneership in the genre too.
Yes, like very much like Beethoven and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart level to me, in my opinion, at least.
Fair enough.
They are very much that. They're that iconic, that solidified into take the music of what they know and turn it into something.
Those of you black metal heads that are watching, if you disagree, let us know in the comments.
Actually,
tell us what you think your pillars are going to be. That would be really interesting, and that can cause that could trigger a really interesting conversation for a much lesser known genre.
I would like to know. That'd be cool.
That would be really cool. So let us know if any of you are into this kind of stuff and you have other bands, even bands we probably didn't even mention, right? If they're out there, just tell us. We're always looking to strike conversation and learn more about what's out there. That's what we're doing this for.
Right. So yeah, Burzum comes along and I think the first demo tape was called Urukai, if I remember, because it was.
I don't know.
It was very much. I listened to it a long time ago, and if I remember, it's just pretty much all guitar piece. Very little, if any, vocal work in there at all that I remember. Just pretty much 2 guitars he recorded, because I don't think he had any drums or nothing or else around, so he just did that. And it was actually really cool and very interesting to listen to. But Euronymous heard it, and then he got brought into the scene, and those 2 really connected. And then this is where we start getting into deeper parts of the culture, where Euronymous was very much about making it the genre bleak and dark and evil for evil's sake. A lot of this was again to really, in their opinions, to birth back, give balls to metal again, because metal kind of lost its balls in the 90s, and everyone could say, especially.
Oh, it did. Oh, yes, it did.
And
we talk about that a couple times.
And that was one of their things, to really bring it back, and also to
or it's something formidable, something that's going to scare an outsider.
Yeah, something to really scare, and that's what I believe. Mayhem was about, in my opinion.
That's a fair claim.
To really throw that out there. And this is where I believe the difference is, where we get into Varg, where Varg brought in a lot of ideas of, cultural paganism in his past. A lot of things when you listen to him talk always tend to revolve back to his culture and back to Norway and all the things that were lost with, like anything historical, when you start reading the introduction of Christianity, and how that basically neutered, the identity of his people. And that's what he latched onto. And a lot of this comes from Tolkien-esque ideas, about, the past being better, which I could relate to too. And
it's where
even
a lot of the
agree
strong anti-Christian sentiment started. And
and that's
not to say you could understand why it would lead to burning down churches.
Well,
but at least that was part of that train of his thought.
But this is where it goes from now, like a more Venom-esque aesthetic into an ideology. And that's the thing in the way I believe, which is commonly thought of, is Varg was the younger kid, one of the younger kids in the genre at the time. Whereas Euronymous and them were in their earlier 20s, they were still young. But if I remember correctly,
Varg was still a teenager.
I think he was like just 18, like barely an adult or something, 19. He wasn't that terribly old. And so, like any young person that are very passionate about their ideas and with the music and all that.
Yeah, very easily shaped by their devotion.
Right. And from what we know, and one thing I won't touch on is all the stories around this time between what goes on, because there's a lot of rumors and then there's a lot of myths. In the documentaries, a lot of them tell you what they say happened, and some people have slight alterations on it, but one of the things that makes black metal great is this mystery around it. Like there's tales of the grave robbings, you know, where they would go and dig up corpses and stuff, bring them back just to have a dead body because it's, you know, cool and cult to do. You know, God.
Well, that's like saying, you know, like there's the truth and then there's the legend. You print the legend.
Right. And that's the hard thing to talk about, because there's tons of stories and things I kind of want to say, but as someone true to history, I almost can't. Because they're, you know, people who can go online and they could easily pull up a wiki and read up all the crazy things that
all the rumors and legends.
Yeah, all the rumors
may or may not have happened. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. And
Now,
like, oh, this guy did this thing and killed this guy and then took the body and then, you know, like whatever.
Right.
But
there are true murders and true arsons and real things that happen, which I will touch on. The ones that we can identify,
at least the ones
as
that we can
fact.
confirm as fact.
Right. But all the other ones, it starts to get very complicated, and it just blends too much. It's too much like that early Bronze Age history kind of, you know, you can't blend out the myth from the, you know,
right.
the
You
truth.
can't put definite dates on when things happen. You
No.
can't really give yourself that really clear who's who and what's what until much later on.
Right.
And
But
by that point, it's already too late.
it's true.
Well, it's always been like that with rock music and artists in general. I mean, you go back to even when, you know, Ozzy Osbourne bit the head off a bat. You know, going back to that thing, like there were so many, when I was in grade school hearing about how evil this Ozzy Osbourne guy was, you know what I mean? Like that was, if it was like something that was going to push your career forward by no press is bad press. They're going to push that. They're going to push that story. So you don't know. Now, a lot of stuff, like you said, like the murders are real. You know, the burning of the church is that real. But what else wasn't real? Who knows? You know, so it's conjecture. So it is what it is. You know, it's like I said, you print the legend. You know.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. And I guess the one thing we could boil it down into the defining moment, where we start getting into a schism in black metal in a weird way, is with the actual murder of Euronymous by Varg. Because the one thing I will say is that was rumored then is that there was a conflict. We know that there was definitely conflict between Varg and Euronymous. We know that. To the depth and extent and how, we don't know. Because the only person alive today is Varg. And, you know, he tells his side of the story. Whether you believe him or not is up to your own opinion. Euronymous cannot tell his story because
he's not here anymore.
No, he got stabbed 23 times.
Yeah.
That did him in. So he ain't able around to tell us. The other person who was around kind of went to jail and kind of remained pretty low key for the most part.
Yeah, pretty quiet about it.
Yeah, Snorri kind of remained low key for the most part. But what has happened is they had a falling out and a disagreement, and it is believed much to do with the identity of what black metal was about. A lot of people attribute to Varg being much about what the ideas of what black metal was truly about, which was about traditional roots, about traditional roots adhering to yourself, but also not adhering to what is the mainstream norm, and really, you know, practicing individualism, which is pretty much what you could boil down a lot of what Varg talks about, which is basically, you know, stick to your roots. Be careful of what comes into your home, and then also, you know, try and be you and not someone else, which really seems to be the messages I get out of his music.
Probably you're not alone. You know, it's probably the message for
I hope not. I hope not. I hope a lot of people get that, because I find his music very inspiring and very much. I love Burzum, and maybe one of my top bands of all time. And I find Varg, the figure himself, interesting, although even saying that alone is going to get 1,000,001, you know, hate comments I could hear already. But
that's the thing. He's an interesting character. He is.
Well, I mean, he's kind of.
Let me ask this: where is he now? Where is Varg now? I know he was arrested. He was convicted. He was put in jail for the murder. Where is he now?
His Varg's not even his legal name anymore. His legal name is actually Louis Cachet, which I find fucking hilarious. But
is he making any new music?
Yes, but it's very released infrequently. Mostly what he does now is a lot of dungeon synth and more traditional styled European music. That's really what he does. He's kind of gone away from the metal stuff. He's evolved as a musician and he's got away. And he has a lot to say. He's very much like against the metal community now, and
Well, sure.
he's even more divisive now, since he's gotten older and he's gotten, but a lot of that I think is just, in my personal opinion, he's just, I did my thing. The past is the past. I'm done with that. I'm moving on to life. Here's my opinions. Varg more or less just lives on his, farm in northern France with his wife, and I think multitudes of children living his own.
Kind of lives on his own terms now.
Yeah, he actually lives off-grid life.
He was doing some and it was probably definitely a couple years ago. He was doing some video blogging and stuff. I know that because I've seen it.
He was doing it on YouTube for a while, and I was actually I used to watch them because I always found them interesting. Some of them were just hilarious because it was like watching your old black metal grandpa go out in the woods and put his wizard hat on sometimes, which was hilarious. And then other times you would actually be terrified because he's sitting there giving you accounts what it's like to be involved in a murder. That's the thing that shifts me away from being a guy to actually full out tell you like, hey, Varg's a cool guy. Everyone should be on Varg's side. I can't do that.
Now let me ask you this. If you had to pick one black metal band to introduce somebody to the style of music, what would it be?
A black metal band to introduce someone to the style.
My vote's on
it's always a question we have to ask when we do these genre podcasts. Who would it be? What band?
So my question is this, and I would like to parse it in this way. Am I showing this to a metal fan or someone who's never heard the genre at all?
We'll say like a heavy rock fan. Someone who loves AC/DC and loves Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. Not someone who's just like going to listen to like Aria Grande or something like that.
Okay, understandable. If we're going that route, then probably what I would show them is surprisingly a band called Ulver. Ulver, whose I'd introduce.
Ulver, okay. Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, and the reason I would introduce that is because Ulver has a more melodic style, a bit more folkiness to them. They very much incorporate tons of traditional Norwegian folk music into their black metal. But they're like a cross between, like I've heard them before. That's why I have to cut in because they're like a cross between a black metal band and a folk metal band. Danton, you'd probably really dig these guys. Nowadays they do more electronic music,
which is even more.
Oh, really?
Ulver is an interesting band, no matter what stage that they're into.
That's like a band that you bust out like at a party with a bunch of musicians and metalheads of like, hey, here's something you never heard before. Like, here's something to take you on a trip to go like really well off the deep end and try some new stuff.
Absolutely. They're who I'd break into because they have a lot of the hallmarks of it, but they're not. A lot of Ulver stuff isn't the 3 albums, the early 3, because some of the stuff is accessible and some of it is truly black metal genre, and you have to go with it. Like I think it's Nattens Hadrugel is the name of the album, where it practically just sounds like a treble hiss. Although it
very much black metal.
Yes, now the thing is, the album is truly fantastic musically, but the recording is you will actually
really appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah,
to be able to get through the whole thing.
Yeah,
otherwise you're in for a ride.
That's one of those like you got to kind of be steeped into the genre for a few years. But there's also the later 2 albums from them are much more accessible in my opinion. And
so you'd recommend those first to a newcomer?
They're probably what I would throw out first. Them or go back to the earliest days to the first genre bands and bust out Bathory and Venom and Celtic Frost and Hellhammer and work them up that way. Because actually, maybe Ulver's what I'd show them if they asked me to show them what's a great way to get straight into it that's right true in the genre as I would know it today. And I'd be like, okay, Ulver. Or if you want an easy way, like I'm not ready for the thing, but I want to start listening. Where do I start? I would say, okay, start with the first wave bands and say those first 4, listen to them. If you could dig that and that sound can appeal to you, then you'll be able to open up more.
You'll be a lot more open to the second wave stuff.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who listen to more traditional punk stuff today
would probably like it a lot more than they would think.
Are actually probably people who would enjoy it more,
Yeah.
especially for that, you know, the recording style. But if we're going off of a modern today with shitty, over-compressed, way too loud instruments all the time recording, if you're very much into a modern recording, black metal is 100% not your genre. And
yeah, you'll hate it. You'll definitely hate it.
I would advise you to just, you know, maybe read about it more because you're going to, if you're that much of an audiophile into your thing and you want it to be that way, or you just need it to sound that bass boosted, which if you're looking for bass in black metal, again, you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's almost non-existent. I mean, it's there, but it is so downplayed.
Right. Well,
musically and literally.
It usually just blends in with the rhythm, but
yeah. It's no, the bass will never have its own unique, interesting part. It's always just a second thought of what the guitar players are doing.
That is changing as of now.
In modern black metal, yes, but in even the first and second waves.
Oh, agreed, absolutely.
You'd be hard pressed to find a really, really interesting bass part in a black metal.
Well, let's toss out some modern black metal. I mean, we've been talking about black metal that existed in the 80s and 90s. What about now? Who are the bands that are doing it now?
Okay, if we're talking about like who would be the biggest names right now, the three that come to mind that really hit off the top of my head.
Let's say Uada comes to mind.
Well, Uada's still pretty underground.
Yeah.
But in the black metal, they're starting to rise, which they need to. That band deserves way more credit. Uada is fantastic. Everyone should listen to them. If you're into any modern metal today, get into Uada right now, is what I would say. But actually, the three biggest that I would say now is one's a divisive band just because of their name, which is Batushka, because there's 3 different Batushkas that I'm aware of right now.
Oh, 3 different bands by the same name?
Yes, there's a reason for that. We could get into that because, again, black metal's never not interesting. Behemoth, probably the biggest black metal name now, even though they're technically a black death band, if we really want to split the hair. But probably the biggest name that everyone could, like, black metal, Behemoth's the name to click to. Whereas the 90s, it would have been Mayhem Burzum. Today, it's Behemoth. But as far as like who is like the pinnacle band that I could point out within the genre and the fans themselves would probably be Mugwa.
Oh, yeah.
Mugwa would probably be the band I'd say right now is the one that has the most respect in the community itself.
And definitely the best balance as far as sound production and quality.
Yes.
Like that is probably the gateway drug for all like a lot of modern metalheads to like, here's what black metal's doing now. And then maybe from there you can kind of trace your steps back to the earlier waves and see if you can sort of glean some kind of appreciation for it.
For like the modern metalhead who's accessible to all the deviations.
Mugwa for sure.
Mugwa is your absolute break-in, and the album I would tell you to start with first is actually Exercise in Futility is the best way to start.
That's the one that we did on the way to the...
It was the one we did on the way to the show, to Auto, actually, yes.
Right,
everyone should get...
I remember really digging that album, cover to cover, and it's only...
I'm going to check that out,
It's pretty short, right?
Yes.
Check it out.
If you get a chance,
check it out. It's awesome.
All of Mugwa's stuff is great, and they just put out a new album last year, Age of Excuse, which is fantastic. That album and Uada's current album Jin are very, to me, really albums I need in this time, and especially in 2020. They're albums
it's pretty fitting for what's going on in the world.
I actually won't forget. It was maybe about a month ago we were sitting together and
previewing the new songs.
Yeah, just before the album dropped. I just got it.
They put out 2 singles off of it.
They put out 2 singles and the album just came out like a week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. I just got it very recently. And when I wanted to show him the first release track, but that night they put out a new track like an hour ago, and I was like, "Oh, we gotta check it out."
And we did both. We ended up doing both.
We did them both, and
it was nice because they showed the lyrics on the video that they showed as the preview, so we were able to literally read along. And there's this whole big like spoken thing.
Yeah,
in the last
practically
like 5 minutes.
Spoken word.
It's like a 10-minute song, if I remember right. It's lengthy, and there's like a whole big chunk, and like everything he's reading, it's like, did he write this about COVID? And it's funny because they wrote all of it before the pandemic really escalated to the point of being global.
Right.
And it's really interesting how that kind of apocalyptic nature of lyric writing for this genre really just pervaded so well in the context of us listening to it in the middle of the summer.
No, absolutely.
It was cool.
And
if anyone listening to this or watching this wants to know how to look up this band, it's spelled MGLA. I had spelled completely wrong. I'm typing it in. I'm like, yeah, that's not it.
So a lot of these bands, that's another characteristic. A lot of them are hard to spell.
So for any of you American fans, which I'm going to assume are almost all at this point,
pretty much everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not like worldwide.
Yeah, for those
we are worldwide, but no one watches us. So,
so yeah, like one of the things to like bring up now is black metal has its roots hardcore more in Europe, and especially Northern Europe, than it does in the rest of the world. Hence its birth. It's just like, you get to England and France, Northern France there. A lot of that's more still new wave stuff or more modern takes on new wave with advanced techniques. As far as like Northern, especially, it's very much a European genre. So that's one of the hallmarks of it too, and it's a part of the culture. And that kind of comes like what I was talking about with Varg. It's very much stay true to your culture. So a lot of them are pretty much like not anglicizing. That's actually interesting. Is a lot of Mayhem's music and earlier black metal stuff was in English, whereas later you go on, it starts to be like right at the 90s. There they split and start singing in their own languages.
Yeah,
like that was one thing that made them unique that I could specifically talk about. In Norway, they most of the bands sang in Norwegian, which is me being older school guys, for a band that wants to make it in the music world in the 80s, 90s, to sing in your native tongue and not English is a fucking death sentence.
Yeah.
And but that's one of the things that black metal adheres to is it's like, look, yeah, English is the language for everybody in music, but fuck that. You have your own culture.
Norwegian is the language that we want to use to express our art.
Which is also why I think a big part of it comes into like adding a lot of cultural vibes. Like what I think that's why Ulver and Norway's folk music blend well.
Yeah.
That's why it never seems to disassociate. I think a lot of that has to do with also atmospheric elements, but we should probably touch on that when we get more into the musical nuances.
Yeah, we could talk about that. Absolutely.
But yeah, that's one of the things too. Like your individual culture hosts, but there is an American black metal scene.
There is in the modern era.
Yeah, well, in the 90s it broke out too, but it was more underground, and basically there were like 5 big bands. There's good ones, like there's if I remember, I think Judas Iscariot is from the US, but I know Leviathan 100%. Everyone should definitely listen to Rest's music. That dude, again, another big divisive figure, because a lot of black metal really just seems to attract this. But
divisive behaviors.
But I would an album I'll throw out again is everyone should listen to The 10th Sublevel of Suicide. And America really bursts a lot of music from Burzum's angle. So a lot of it has that more atmospheric vibe, and that's where it started kind of dividing then. Like after the murder in the 90s, people kind of picked for a short while, like a 5-year period, people were like, either you're on Euronymous' side or Varg's side. So people either went, more of a Mayhem sound, which is more of just traditional aggression, dark themes, for that sake, whereas Varg's was more artistic, atmospheric, not degrading each one,
right.
But
just kind of trying to sort of generalize and state.
Right. And that seemed to attract more of like, it's almost weird. Like the Eastern part of the hemisphere and like the Northern seemed to be more stuck with a Mayhem vibe, while like the West and the Americas got more of the Burzum vibe at the time. Nowadays, that's kind of just blended everywhere and everyone's doing their own thing. But that's kind of what it seemed like at the time. And we got this cool split, whereas like you were talking before, one of the things like the hallmarks are like the tempos, like especially being fast and playing a lot with tremolo tempo. Yeah. Whereas black metal actually has a lot of its influence in doom as well. When you listen to it, a lot of black metal has doom vibes into it too, and especially when you get to the atmospheric stuff. It tends to
get real doomy,
and it can get very dark very quick.
Which is awesome.
But and some of those doom metal bands sound like black metal bands with better vocalists.
Yeah, it's
more traditional vocalists. How's that? More traditional vocalists.
I know what you
mean. Yeah,
you're good, man.
More traditional, refined vocalists.
Oh man. Yeah. Recently, with the times, the just plain old just satanic bands coming up just to be divisive because of current religious institutions and people and their communities and just how insane the world is now tend to be coming up a bit more prominent.
Yeah.
And
and they have their place.
And they absolutely have their
They
place.
totally have their
and
place.
some of them
in
have
the
legit
80s.
things to say too. It's just one of the unfortunate things is I just don't want the 90s samey thing to come back again. But
yeah, well, that's inevitable. You know, this is something really clicks, and then a lot of people tend to kind of flock to it.
Oh, absolutely,
and try to
man.
replicate that.
Right. It's just that
it's
this is just
happen.
me being my old man curmudgeonly self.
Yeah.
But but black metal.
Wait till you get my age.
Oh man, I can't wait. I think maybe, but
I'd say in spirit you're pretty much there.
I was gonna say in spirit, I'm like, man, I feel like 300 years old. I know I'm only barely 30, but I feel like 900. It's ridiculous. But anyway, getting back into like the atmospheric stuff too. That's one of the cool things too is black metal started taking on it went from being an extreme metal genre to now more. It died out in the 2000s. It rode through especially the early 90s into the late 90s, and then kind of melodic death metal came out in Europe, and the symphonic metal bands blew up, and that took it over because black metal, while it was musically entertaining as well and is also good, it's also part of a theatric. That's something we haven't touched on too. It's like
kind of die off, or it's like, oh, okay, another.
Yeah, exactly.
Another lead singer spitting blood onto an upside down cross. All right, I've already seen this a dozen times.
Exactly, and even if you really vibe with that thing, if like for people who aren't like the true cult people, just
they're eventually going to kind of phase out.
Exactly,
to something else.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of happened, and that is the best thing that happened to the genre.
Yeah, it had a pretty short lifespan of like when it was really, really entertaining.
And it did. And you know what? I'm coming around to thinking this is the best way that metal has to survive. Is that
these little spurts of a new thing, and then it just dies away.
It should just be the burst.
So much of it then gets obscured in myth and legend.
With the exception of core music, that can die off. But
well, that's a matter of personal.
But that's just me and my personal opinion.
Right.
But
to which many would agree, but
true.
Not everybody though.
No, they're just those who agree are correct. Is all.
Well, the nice thing about one of the only nice things about like finding music on the internet is the fact that you can find music on the internet. Like if you're into some kind of crazy cult black metal thing, there's a ton of bands doing it, and you like that, go find it, because back when in the 80s and even early 90s, if you like, I got my mind blown like when I started searching for bands on the internet, and I found out there was a bunch of bands that sounded like Iron Maiden and Halloween and Judas Priest, and it was power metal. It was power, and I was like, in early, mid 90s, I was like, this is great. Same thing with thrash bands, same thing with black metal bands and death metal bands. That's the only good thing about music on the internet right now is if you like something,
it's easy to find.
I agree with you. That's the only good thing that the internet has done for music. It has literally given you access to anyone, no matter how obscure or how even niche your genre.
Anyone and everyone.
I mean, we have noise music. We literally have a genre where you could take white noise and pitch modulate it, and people will buy it. You
sent me something like that, Danton. You sent me some kind of crazy.
Oh, did you send him the Black MIDI?
No, I don't remember.
I don't remember what it was. I listened to it for 5 seconds. I'm like, I'm done. It was bad, man.
Most of it is. There's some stuff that have unique concepts that you could, like, if you really want to build off of, you could get into it. But again, that's one of those, like, when you're like, you really need to have the right mojo for that, or the right substance to really delve into that. Just for me, that's my thing. I know there are those people that could just dive right into white noise and just get into it. But
there's something out there for everybody.
Absolutely. And that's, like I said, that's the main thing I like about music on the internet is, man, whatever you're into. Like, I'll go back and I'll mention folk metal again. There was no way a guy here in Pennsylvania was going to learn about folk metal unless the internet existed.
No,
I love the genre of folk metal, and Danton, he just discovered pirate metal, which is just
and that's been a recurring in the past couple of weeks. I've been talking a lot about pirate metal, and I was talking more about pirate metal today.
And this podcast is getting me more and more interested in going back and listening to some of the black metal stuff that I kind of was like, it's interesting. I get what they're doing. I want to go back and I want to listen to some more Mayhem, some Burzum, Immortal, Emperor, even. I know Emperor a little bit more actually. Now that I mentioned it, I have an album by them.
Emperor is an excellent example of what high class musicians can do with a genre.
Yeah.
As far like that's one. Well, I mean, Varg is too. Mm-hmm. I mean, Varg's more of an innovator. Whereas, let me think. What's a good classical? More of a Chopin, able to take of like what they, or more of a Bach, take of like a structure and what you could build and make it interesting.
Yeah, you can pretty much make that claim about Varg in either of those respects. Whether you're doing Bach as sort of like a progenitor,
right,
and like with his use of harmonies and things, or Chopin stylistically with how he's kind of carried it into a new era,
right,
you can kind of make either of those claims, and that would be really interesting for any of you classical musicians out there to kind of that's because fun for me,
because Emperor is actually black metal written by people who are competent in classic music,
right? They're classically trained, aren't they?
Ishan is, as far as I'm aware, and I believe Samoth is. I don't know about the rest of them, but I would want to say yes.
And I would be very interested to hear from any of our classically trained followers on the channel of like, take a look at some of this black metal stuff and see what sort of things you can glean from it, because you can kind of look at it in a similar way that I did when I first looked at it, because I didn't even get my initial exposure into this genre until after finishing classical training at the university level. And then it's like, oh, let's apply all that kind of like crazy, like off the wall geek music theory stuff and like trying to figure out what's going on with this genre with like these guys that are doing this like real low quality stuff, but they're still making some really high quality art. And that's why, to kind of contradict, when we were going back to like what's like the first band you would introduce to somebody who's not into black metal, and it's like, oh, you might want to go for something like more modern, like Mugla, to kind of like to get them into it and ease them in. For me, it's like, let's go right to the extreme and do for me it's like a toss-up between Emperor and Immortal. Is like go right into like the heart of that second wave of like really like the epitome of what this sound is, and go to that extreme and work your way backwards, because then you get to hear, all right, well, Burzum is kind of like that, but it's a little bit more mellow and a little more melancholy, and like, okay, I can kind of get where I can have an appreciation of this. It's just like it's and we're sitting here drinking what is it? Icelandic beer, and it's kind of like the same thing. Like when you get someone into like trying a new kind of drink, it's like, do you do something that's like gonna like really ease them in, or do you take them all the way to the end and then let them work their way back? I know that works for me.
It's
with
true.
So many different kinds of drinks, is like jumping right into something that's like really, really extreme and thinking, oh, what is this? And then working back to something that you can kind of tolerate, and then working your way back.
Bringing up Iceland is actually interesting too, because like even just a few years ago, we just had a brand new birth in black metal called Icelandic black metal.
Yeah,
we've had a brand new like a new genre born just very recently, because we have what's known as true Norwegian black metal, which is the second wave stuff, where basically what we identified the genre is, and then we have atmospheric, and there's other sub genres, just like any good metal genre needs to have 500 million sub genres. Like what I classified is, to me, black metal could be 4 genres that I put it under. Which is the true Norwegian style, which is, traditionally raw, all the classic stuff I have in there. And then we get the Swedish sound, which tends to be more melodic. I find Swedish black metal tends to be, which a lot of Swedish music tends to just be very heavily melody based.
Melody driven. Okay.
And so that seems to be the big thing with a lot of Swedish black metal bands.
Okay.
And now we have Icelandic, where I find Icelandic to be very apocalyptic in feel. Icelandic music takes, basically, imagine ripping the pure apocalyptic doom feels straight from it, and that's what you kind of get, and then you just add the black metal, just for
slamming it right on top of a black metal,
right? And one of the things too, especially those Iceland's people, God, those Iceland people. Those the people in Iceland really
those Icelands.
Hey, you could pick on me when you learn a second language. But the Icelandic black metal bands seemed to really capture that nihilistic feel. Mugla has a lot of that in their writing, but the like more lyrically, whereas Icelandic bands exemplify that in the music itself.
Yeah, in every aspect of
and one of the best examples I could give is a band called Sinmara, and the song's called Mountain of Quivering Bone. And that
Sounds
song
happy.
alone. Yeah.
Very cheerful.
Yeah, Mountain of Quivering Bone really kind of gives you that would be the best thing I could tell you. Like, if you want a good idea what Icelandic music feels like in the black metal genre, here you go. It's not one of those you want to put on like if you're like, going for your good ride to the show or doing something. It's very much
going to like a party or at a party.
Nah.
That's not really a thing you want to play at a party.
No. Well, I mean, fuck, I play Sun at parties, but that's because I'm an ass.
Oh wow, that'll let everyone will leave.
Yeah.
I'll enjoy it.
Well, especially because I put on It Took the Night to Believe, so everyone.
Well, most of your immediate friend circle is pretty true cult, though. They're like
True.
kind of super into that.
Oh yeah,
stuff,
I just go out of my way to annoy everyone who's not. It's fun, but no, that was just a specific scenario. But yeah, that's another thing too. And then the last one I would say is the atmospheric stuff. Black metal
Which it's not really specific to one particular region. It's more like it could be anywhere.
Yeah, to me, atmospheric seems to be very much anywhere.
Okay.
And that's how I break it down. A lot of people will get very more specific because there's other ones we could get into.
Sure.
Like we can even get into as divisive a topic as NSBM, which stands for National Socialistic Black Metal.
Oh.
Which is very blatant and has really taken off with the concept of when Varg wrote those books in prison. They really took off with it. Yeah. But we also got some other bands that could be divisive, such as DSBM, which is depressive suicidal black music. And it's a very good genre. It's artistically beautiful and tends to be more of the atmospheric kind of variety. But a lot of the figures in that usually tend to be truly sad and depressing figures that I find out. Some people do it just because they want to make sad music. Mm-hmm. But as far as like the core people that I know, like Zaster, who is an American black metal guy, he makes a lot of DSBM, is truly a troubled figure, and I wish the best for him. I hope that dude does well. But like, yeah, that's one of the things too. That genre seems to really... Black metal seems to really attract more of the people with the more negative aspects, it seems. And I don't mean that in the term of saying like
negative doesn't mean bad.
No, I'm not saying like it attracts like the worst people in this, but what I mean, black metal tends to really attract those people who have some sort of connection or relation to more of like the
something more
shittier
difficult
parts of life. Yeah. And it really plays up with that. And you could hear that too in the sound. And especially you could even
read it in the lyrics. You could see it on stage when you go
the fact of it being a metal genre alone could tell you that person's kind of frame to begin with, just like any genre. A person who makes any type of music, you can tell their frame of mind either by the style of music they play or the song they make, alone. Mm-hmm. You kind of get that going on. But
when you look at the black metal music, it's very dark. It's very I don't want to say depressing, but it's dark, it's depressing, it's melancholy. It's it's all minor keys and stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, and I'll use, personal experience, like when I was younger, when I felt horrible, I'd listen to Black Sabbath and it would lift my mood. I would listen to some, and even like when I was older, like in college, when I started getting into doom metal, I would listen to a band like Solitude Aeternus, one or two of their first albums that were real doomy and sludgy, and it would lift my spirits because of that. And that's probably what
you kind of embrace the heaviness of what you're going through in your life. It's that catharsis that you get from listening to something that's really melancholic or angry. Even.
And that seems to be like a big core of
getting that kind of release in your brain from listening to it.
Right.
So in a way, this music is positive. In a way, it's positive because it's
if
you're in a bad mood, man, you throw on something like this.
It's a proper ventilation.
It's a release.
Foul negative emotions.
Yeah, that's actually a great thing. I'm glad you said that, because if there's anything, regardless even of what I say, one of the things I'm hoping people will get from what I say is black metal, even though I'm saying all this, it truly is a positive genre.
Absolutely.
And I mean, hell, there's regardless of your view on religion, there are good Christians and bad Christians out there.
Right. Exactly.
Just because back in the day everyone went and basically annihilated everyone of an opposing culture till it was just purely that way. Also, there's good that comes out of it too. Like concepts of, universal charity and doing one another for mankind and stuff. So there is, again, it's always a one hand washes the other situation. For me, it's very much, I always tend to see the genre as positive. But the best thing about it is, like you were saying, is, metal, the reason we all know why we listen to metal is it's an outlet music.
Yeah.
Not only do we enjoy the sound itself, the point of metal itself is to outlet whatever we either can't, because of, either laws or, moral obligations, whatever you do, it's your way of being able to truly freely express yourself, either through someone saying what you're thinking or at least you being able to release it in that way. Yeah. And black metal just seems to be more, black metal seems to harness that boiled down, really boiled down. Like thrash, probably in the best thrash way. Really wants to claim that, but thrash drinks too much beer to really claim that idea. Yeah. And so, like, that's the thing for that's the thing for me. More people in black metal, they don't tend to drink less beer, more wine and cigarettes. So it kind of gives you the idea of what's going on there when we get the vibe. So,
So in short, black metal is thrash with more sophistication.
That's a way to think about it. That's a way to think about it.
You can kind of put yourself on that train of thought.
No, absolutely.
It's definitely more specialized and specific with what it's trying to achieve and how it's trying to achieve it.
Yeah, black metal is always...
Thrash is a little more diverse.
Yeah, thrash has a lot more room to expand. Not saying black metal doesn't, because it definitely does. Especially...
But it kind of didn't.
Right.
There's a lot of the same ways that thrash did in the years that followed its heyday.
True. And one divisive thing I think I'll say for black metal that... Now, this is going for like a metal historian route, so maybe we could go back to the 90s again, a very important time for our genre. Whereas a lot of people always credit Pantera as the rebirth, 90s. They were the band that brought metal back to what it was. Maybe in popularity, I might give you that. But as far as what actually brought metal back to its roots, to me, would be black metal itself. Because black metal really... brought death metal at the time was creating great music, and there's a lot of awesome stuff, but there's also a lot of samey stuff. Metal needed a breath of life. It needed something different, and it came around exactly when it needed, and literally basically decided to say, let's stick the flame under the beaker of metal and just purely distill metal down into what is core of metal.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point. When you talk about any of these big black metal acts from the first wave, second wave, modern, even like the specific regional bits you talked about, you listen to 4 bars of a black metal song, and anyone who's really, kind of seated in the genre can tell you right away who that is. They can instantly recognize. Yeah. There's not really so much confusion and, like, oh, is it that band or that band? No, it's definitely Mayhem.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely,
and even in black metal, when you hear someone who sounds like somebody, they're still distinct. And I think that comes down to 2 things. One, definitely the writing culture, for sure, being able, and 2, the raw recordings. Because, again, now, I don't know how much raw recorded stuff you listen to. I've almost absolutely shied away from overproduced music nowadays. But there's just music I find it's just too good and I can't let it go. So I need to buy, or there's bands that I'm so dedicated to, I'll still buy their stuff. But the modern recording scene is just so abysmal. And recording, again, is a key aspect of black metal. And that's something I'd like to touch about too, is that timbral diversity is basically fucking gone in all music except black metal, in my opinion, nowadays. I cannot hear the volume difference in any drum hit on any album except in black metal albums. Basically when I could hear someone just gently tapping it, I could tell that it's not fucking volume boosted by some stupid dipshit in a recording studio making that light tap snare hit so loud that I'm like, you could really hear it. He's barely touching it like a feather, but I could hear it so clear as day. Boy, isn't that awesome and what the artist intended, I'm sure. But, but...
Yeah, the human factor is gone in a lot of these recordings.
Yeah.
Definitely, human factor is gone. Especially like you're talking about the drummer. I agree with you totally. I totally agree with you with drums nowadays. Yeah, some of them aren't even real. So
No.
you know.
Yeah.
No, and I get the thing, like, put on, your click track, that way you're in time. And to a degree.
There are certain modern recording conventions that definitely belong.
I agree. So
in
like
the process.
Yeah, like if you're writing like a massive, complicated piece, like if you're really going out there to like do, like a Chopin or a Mozart style, like really needs to be produced this way in this kind of excellence, then I understand that. But there's always, a tone that goes with that kind of music that you could hear. And obviously pop music, in modern genres are definitely do not require that level of sophistication in your recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, a big problem is that too, you don't have actual musicians in those recordings. They're just, a lot of them are just audio people. And while they
sound engineers.
Yeah, a lot of sound engineers so sit and listen stuff and can get an ear and get really good, and not saying they're not talented, but you don't have enough raw musicians in there who understand proper musical theory, or even are willing to work with an artist on his musical concepts just for the sake of that sound quality, and everyone needs to have that. And that really, I think that's, again, what makes it unique as far as the actual records go. Because when you're hearing it, you can clearly hear that band, and that's them playing it. That's not them being cut up or having a session guy to come in to play a part that's too complicated because you wrote it too hard and you can't perform it that day, just because whatever, you hurt your hand or it's too swollen because it's too hot out, so you can't get your fucking, scales to work. So you had to have your buddy come in and record it. No. There's very little of that in black metal. And again, back to
you're saying it's a very real genre. It's a very real genre of music, unlike a lot of the modern metal or the modern rock stuff today. I agree.
For the most part, yes. And that's one of the things that the black metal culture is most proud about, is the fact that the musicians are truly coming at this from a sense of an artistic perspective, or at least from someone who wants to make the music, even if we're even just getting that base, is the fact that they're going out there getting, sometimes purposely shitty equipment and instruments, but they're using what they have and they're making the best thing they can, or the thing that they know is them, and putting their heart into it. And that's what I love the best.
They very much know
something you don't have no more.
They very much know who they are, and they embrace that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's no sugarcoating anything in black metal.
No.
I don't even think they know what sugar is.
I find the whole thing fascinating. I find this whole thing fascinating. Just like last week when we were talking about the modern gent movement that I wasn't really familiar with, I was probably a little bit more familiar with black metal, actually, which is weird. But we just scratched the surface, really, with all this. I mean, we could go on for 8 hours. So with that said, let's get some final thoughts going. Let's wrap this bad boy up, man. Final thoughts on black metal, guys.
All right, final thoughts. You want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, my final thoughts are pretty much uniform from episode to episode. Go out and listen. Those of you that are tuning into the show, it's been really cool the last several weeks as this thing has really grown and blown up to where it's become, to have so many interested people that are following and watching the videos. And we have a lot of subscribers now, which I'm really excited about. So those of you that are tuning in, what's the harm in going to, even if it's something like really kind of dark and abrasive like black metal, you might find something you like. So your final thoughts?
My final thoughts. A lot of them are similar to yours. One thing I'll definitely add on is, if you don't like any of the black metal bands that you listen to, make your own black metal. That's kind of what the genre is weirdly about in a way. But one of the things too is, like I'm saying, is there's definitely a click. Sometimes it may never click for you. Black metal is one of those genres that it just may never.
It's not for everybody.
It's definitely one of those genres that are not for everybody, and which is fine.
Yeah,
that's good. Everything I don't think is made for everybody, as it well should be. But one thing I would definitely say is, even if black metal is not the thing that people come away from this, one thing I would say is be more mindful of the music you're listening to. I would say go out of your way more to listen to stuff that's not recorded in the modern way, and like blatantly people who are going out of their way to do different recording techniques, or even just seeing live musicians, is what I would really say. Bizarre way to pull that out of it, but that's what I would like to take out of it, because that's what I think is the core thing for black metal. It's the performing your art and your music and expressing what you want to do and say. And I would like people to really take that away from, if nothing, take that away from black metal as the one single positive thing. And then as far from that, I would say read, educate yourself, and be careful of all the rumors, because everyone is going to have 1,000,001 different things of what they say did happen.
Do your research. Do the due
research
diligence.
is necessary.
Yeah,
when
really,
it comes
really
to
know
this
what's
genre.
going on.
That's all I'd really say to it. And I'd be happy to explain more maybe on another video for black metal.
Well,
but
this is clearly a topic we could really easily come back to in the future. So, Jeff?
Just like all of them, we could always do another 6 hours talking about any kind of genre of music. What happened with me today was pretty cool. I actually thought about my high school years listening to Venom in the afternoon, revisiting that. I pictured the hallway I was walking down, with the lockers on either side, with the badass guy down the hall here with the painted Venom logo on his back patch, stuff like that.
Yep.
What's that?
The bag of cassettes from the tape.
Oh yeah.
tape.
Oh god. Yeah. Oh man, I had a ton of cassettes. I still do. I still have some of them actually. But yeah, revisiting Bathory. Yeah, I revisited them. I didn't like it as much as I liked Venom. Just going back and listening to it again after 30 some years. Venom I could still see, and I could talk about Venom a lot more. really can. And you mentioned Merciful Fate. I've always been a big fan of Merciful Fate. I can't believe I forgot to even put them on my notes. And King Diamond, Danton, I'm going to introduce you to him because you're going to love him. And just revisiting the stuff that I learned from the documentaries about Mayhem and Burzum and Emperor. And it wasn't just the one documentary that just had that to do with it. It was the other documentaries that Banger Films made, the Headbanger's Journey. That introduced me to a lot of black metal too. I'll plug Sam Dunn if I have to. Sam's a good guy. He doesn't know me, but he makes good films. And it's like, what I aspire to sometimes with making the videos that I do for either, my actual day job or just doing this, is to educate people about all these different styles of music. Like, music doesn't end with popular radio, and I've always said that for my entire life. Like I said before, the internet kind of leveled that playing field a little bit. So if you wanted to find out stuff, you did. And this is a perfect example of a genre of music that you could just go out and search, you take these names and go down that rabbit hole.
It's on the radio. That's a guarantee.
No, God.
It's not even on the radio. So
go on a journey.
You take Mayhem, Dark Throne, Burzum, throw them into Google. And then from there, you're down a rabbit hole of, black metal that, like you said, you may not like it. You may like it. You may find something in Immortal or Gorgoroth or even the older stuff that you like. But always just expand your horizons with music, and don't just whatever popular media is force feeding you. Never stop there. And it goes with all genres. All these genres, especially like black metal, and like last week with the gent stuff. I spent pretty much last week listening to gent music. So that's where we're gonna go right now, because we always do this at the end of our shows. What have you been listening to during the week? And I'll say I've been listening to Arc Echo.
Oh yeah, new album just dropped.
Band, wow,
mind blowing.
Haven't heard.
Oh my God, is it good? I listened to it all week, other than when I listened to Venom today. Arc Echo's fantastic. What have you been listening to, Danton?
So I'm still rocking the peg leg and eye patch. And, the last couple of weeks I've been on this big pirate metal kick. And it was funny because Josh and I were just talking about it a few days ago, getting ready. And I was like, how have we been friends for this long? And you never showed me pirate metal. And
I swore I did.
He showed me Swashbuckle back in the day, like when they were like first on their rise. And
I thought so. Yeah. Cruise Ship Terror, I think I remember was what I should, because I remember when it came out and I thought that
either that or
was
something
great.
else. And I don't know, something about Swashbuckle. I mean, they're great, but something about them, it just didn't click for me at first. And I was like, all right, it's kind of like when you get Swashbuckle, it's like exactly what you'd expect when you hear the term pirate metal. It's like, all right, we're gonna have songs about rum and cannons and maidens, and there's probably gonna be some accordion here and there, and it's gonna be like sludgy, thrashy guitar. There's gonna be some fiddle, and then like that's gonna be it. There's not really gonna be a whole lot of substance beyond that. So I went from Swashbuckle, and last week I think we talked about these guys a little bit. I went into Rum Ahoy.
Yeah.
Which was like for me, like Rum Ahoy was a step up as like far as like the pirate metal thing goes, because it was a little bit goofier, a little bit sillier, and it had a lot more like different instruments featured, you know. And Jeff posted on our Facebook page, they have that awesome song Harambe the Pirate Gorilla, and it's just hysterical. And I'm still cracking up listening to that. So I've gone through pretty much all of the discography of what Ramahoy has available on Spotify, because that's my primary way to get into new artists is let's see what's, and I just go like full albums. I do like a whole album cover to cover, and I've done that with all the Ramahoy stuff that's available on Spotify. It might not be all of their output, but it was a pretty significant, there was like 3 or 4 different records that I got to go through, and the more I did it, the more I loved it. And the big kick for me now, I finished Ramahoy, and now we're on to Ailstorm, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the pinnacle of what pirate metal is and what it should be, as far as instrumentation, as far as lyrical content. And I started with their newest album that came out. It was either just this year or like within the last 2 years. It's The Curse of the Crystal Coconut. And I had to start there because anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Donkey Kong Country fan. So the whole, you know, just pirate things in general being pretty seated in like a lot of the old school Donkey Kong Country games, and the fact that they had an album about crystal coconuts, I'm like, I have to do this one first. I usually start at the beginning and work my way up, but I started with Curse of the Crystal Coconut and instantly fell in love with them. And then I went back and I did Captain Morgan's Revenge, their first album, and then I went through Black Sails at Midnight. And I just finished today. I did a nice long trip to get up here to do the podcast today. So I had a nice good 2 hours on the road. I got through all of, they have like this real good, like Norwegian themed kind of thing back in time. And it's like, you know, like Vikings versus pirates. And it gets cooler and cooler. The more I'm going, the more I'm just loving this band. And like, I feel guilty. I shouldn't love this genre as much as I am. Cause I, like, anyone who knows me, I'm like super into like more technical, like progressive stuff.
Yeah.
And
raw guy for sure.
For every one time I listened to Arc Echo this week, I was like doing Ailstorm like 20 more times and like checking all the other different stuff out. So I'm still on my pirate journey. I probably won't finish it for another week or two at least. And then I swear, I promise the audience that I'll try to kind of branch out and get into some other stuff too. Cause like the more we do these episodes, the more my listening queue list just grows and grows and grows of more things for me to check out. And that's what I've been personally enjoying so much about doing this. Cause I'm just sitting back and learning. I'm just learning about all this awesome metal that I don't know anything about. And that's what I love the most. So Josh, what have you been up to this week?
What I've been listening to?
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad you picked black metal because like I was said before, Jin just came out. So since that's come out, that's kind of just been in my car constantly being rotated through. Also, what I've been listening to is a band called Ancestral Shadows.
Okay.
I've been trying to really get into my local black metal scene. Well, local for the Northeast area, I should say.
Okay.
But up in Salem, Massachusetts, Ancestral Shadows, I just got their first album, Preserving the Darkness, which is really good. I thought that was an excellent album. The other band I'm listening to, I just got is Satanic War Master. I got their album, Oberflust. I just got that. And the last one I got is, I finally, it took me forever. I finally got all the music from Word Hysteria, which is a local band around here too. So I got their stuff as well. Just got their CD that came in. And then I got the EP, which just came out recently. And that's what I've been listening to.
This has been a great conversation about black metal. Like I always say at the end, or you say at the end, one of us says at the end, like and subscribe and post in our Facebook group, please. Help us grow the group.
Conversations go and keep sharing. There's got to be so many bands we didn't talk about. And Josh just really quickly off the cuff mentioned Bane, which is another really fantastic modern black metal act that we're super into. And, you know, we've been following them all through like the Philly scene, doing some of their local touring, at least in the last year before COVID.
Right, absolutely.
We got the pleasure of seeing them twice, and they were even better the second time when they headlined. It was awesome. So big shout out to those guys. Bane, we love you. Nothing but the most love for you guys. Keep rocking, and you know we're all gonna get through this nightmare. And in the meantime, we could all just hunker down and have tons of music to listen to keep ourselves busy while we're all waiting for quarantine to end.
Oh, it's been. I don't want quarantine in. I get to listen to so much music because of.
I kind of don't either. I've kind of been enjoying it.
Oh,
But
man.
yeah, but that's neither here nor there. So
Right.
until then, this is our black metal segment, episode 1 of probably many on this topic. Just like all the other things,
I'm
you know,
always
like
ready.
we're kind of like in our effective first season of this whole thing, really just exploring a lot of different genres and talking about bands and trying to plug some stuff and generate some conversation and get some hype going.
Yeah.
So the way it's going, there's plenty more to come, guys. So like Jeff said, like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts, share bands that you're into, share bands that you don't like, and we'll talk about,
Share questions. You
share
want us to answer?
questions. Yeah, definitely post questions on the Facebook page, post them in comments on our YouTube videos. And eventually I'd like to have that real nice, healthy conversation, even about stuff that we're not super into, and see
That
if
would
we
be
can find a
awesome.
way to kind
That
of
sounds
have
rad.
that sort of side of it as well. Not even just so much us geeking out about the stuff that we're really into and we really love, but talking about stuff we're not into. So until then,
Mhm.
that's what we have.
Yeah, that's
So-
what I got, man.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help.